We got 299 with the boys. It's 9:41. The Pro-Am starts in the morning. We are on a rager. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing good. I'm impressed that you really went for that. You did have one shot at that intro.
Yes. I couldn't do it beforehand. I was eyeing it. I was like, oh, kind of. I want to kind of get into this, but
it went perfect. Don't worry.
I love it.
I'm kind of disappointed in the toddlers in your household that this one wasn't shaken, and we had a great clip.
Trust and believe the amount of just liquid she'll just like run up to me and be like, here. And I'm like, thanks. I definitely needed a fourth bottle of water or another LaCroix or just a beer. I'm like, I don't know how you have this, but somebody watch this kid. I don't know why. That's neither here nor there. Speaking of toddlers being kicked around, not that there's any toddlers being kicked around in this household. Why does that matter? It doesn't. Hello. Hi. Heurix and Dora here. Welcome.
I thought there was a spark level contender
solid.
I thought that's where it was going.
That I was actively fighting my brain to not punch down like that because we just talked about like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, well, you're not an Overwatch League team, so it's a little bit more okay.
Is it? I don't know.
You're not yeah. I think you're all right. You can make the joke.
All right, good. All right.
Far, but like you'd be okay.
I feel okay. So this is kind of where I'm at with it, where it's like I'm much more interested in punching down on like piss poor performing Overwatch League teams than I am going like, boy, howdy, Trick Room, did you have a bad tournament? Ugh, timeless, naughty.
Also, did they even have a bad tournament?
They had
I mean, come on.
I actually don't think any of the Contenders teams had what you would ever call a bad tournament.
Not at all. Yeah. Definitely surprising. Definitely like good, I would say. Well, maybe not good, but
I'd say good. No, I'd say actively good.
Right. That's fair. I like it.
Yeah, and if you make Chalk sweat this much, then like I feel like you kind of succeeded. Yes, there were circumstances around that, but yeah, I don't know. I was actually pleasantly surprised that some teams actually were competitive. I think considering how like roided out of control NA is this season, I didn't expect that.
That's true, actually.
A little roided. Yiska, how are you? Doing good?
All good. Yeah. Okay. First off, congratulations to you guys for your Overwatch League debut. I will say, I think like it's always great when that coincides with when you just get gifted the perfect play. And I also thought like the Saints bait against the Spitfire, you guys brought that shit home. Like I was feeling it. There was some Toby Wan moment.
Insane, dude. It was like 4 fights, 4 moments in a row of just absolute insanity. Yeah, that made you believe for a sec.
Yeah, we actually just a peek behind the curtains. We actually had like a moment in that match actually specifically where I was so deeply invested in like all the analysis of like what was going on, why it was happening, everything like that. mid cast, I get a DM from Dor, and he's like, "Bro, stop! It's all emotion now, dude. Just like let's just go for it." So we made that pivot then, and I think that was going into Blizzard World where we made that next shift. Yeah. That was second round. I don't think I saw it until Blizzard World. Though.
I just DM'd him like, "Bro, shut up."
It was a good call. I think like that's gotta be like I don't know if I want to say like the craziest play, but that's like definitely one of the plays of the event, if not like maybe a play of the year. Yeah, and then having you guys
the best map so far.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking specifically like the boop, the bait and boop off the side? Yeah. I see it on this. Yeah, I see it there. Yeah. That's different, man.
You went.
It's funny. I was watching the co-stream as well, and they're having like the same emotions go through their head that were mine. It's like the previous fight they weren't supposed to be able to have reset, and then there's just like 4 of them chilling on that dock, and it's just like, wait, they're just gonna stay back there, and then they get chased down like right as the other people are spawning in. It's like, oh my god, they're just gonna stay back there. Yeah, that was a wild one.
Yeah, for sure. I think if anything, in terms of I struggle to call it an underperformance, but I think in in like preparation of this. I think like Saints had a serious shot making it out here.
Definitely.
And I think in that they maybe underperformed a little bit, but still like this match turned out to be insane. And
there's so many caveats to a lot of these performances though, because there are teams that just are coming into this tournament in the group stage as a shadow of their former selves. I mean,
Yeah.
to a degree at least, right? Like Saints are still an incredible team, but missing out on CJ, we brought this up on broadcast like a lot, but it matters. Like CJ was a very integral piece for Saints and their success. And I think obviously Squid played fantastically. We can get more into that stuff specifically later, but like, you know, that kind of stuff is the case with a lot of these teams, it feels like. And a lot of people were talking about, oh, this is like start to the Overwatch League season. These teams have been playing for like months. Overwatch League just started. That is just so far removed from what is actually reality. And I think people need to like maybe reel that one back in a little bit because that's just not true. Outside of Trick Room, who genuinely have been playing together for like the last 4 months. But, you know, outside of that.
A lot of moving parts, a lot of, you know, caveats, you know, shock on upwards of 150, 180 ping. People, you know, getting moved around. Valiant, obviously, you know, coming out of the under the ring with a steel chair. The ski masks are off. They finally have a roster now. And some of those are, you know, from other teams in the event. Like it's there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of, you know, a lot of things. It's an exciting time to kind of get back in the swing of things and get a first look at, you know, maybe your favorite team or like teams that you're interested in following. But you know, is it the most, you know, should this be the start of the season? Is this the most de facto, you know, tempo setting, rhythm setting event to the season?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch football and you watch like preseason, this is the exact same thing. Don't go into it expecting to see, you know, all the good teams to go 4-0 and all the bad teams to go 0-4. Everybody's like, it's preseason. Like, just take it for what it is. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good, you know, insight into what some of these teams' potentials may be, and it's also a good way for us to see some, you know, other people that people may not see, like from Contenders, obviously.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that has to be said around these games that isn't really able to be told in a best of 3 as well. Like the difference between a stomp and a close as hell 2 games was very thin. And just by looking at the brackets, the groups, like Heurix was saying, it's not really going to be the best litmus test going into the season, but for some teams it was a better litmus test than others, right? Mayhem coming through, I think, proved undoubtedly that like, yeah, that's definitely going to be successful, and how far is a good question. Vegas Eternal, unfortunately, it probably means a little something for, at least to the start of the season, of the quality of play. Atlanta, obviously. But I think the Contenders teams as well, the performances, despite the scorelines, despite the non-qualification, they only got closer. I think Heurix and I agreed on the final day of broadcast, like Timeless over the course of the tournament improved a ton. Like from game 1 through game 4 for them, big difference. And you could tell in the match against Trick Room, right? Like they were just another team. And so despite them not making it, a lot of them played extremely close and very well could have taken games had they gone a little bit different, right? There are moments when Trick Room got 2-0'd where if they just happened to win one submap or make one less mistake on Antarctica, all of a sudden, like that's probably then qualifying, right? With how close it was in the tiebreaker, but alas, you know, no dice.
Did you guys talk last week about the map type order? Did you guys? Because I didn't get to catch up because we went like right into you know, going straight into Pro-Am. There was rehearsals all week, and then, you know, we worked 3 days in a row and everything. So I didn't get to see your guys' episode. Did you guys talk about that at all? The map types?
I don't think we talked about the map types. I knew that it was going to be a first to 2, but I don't know even if those were, if the order was public. If it was, I wasn't aware.
Yeah, so I mean, there's also something certainly to be said about the way that the group stages function and the fact that they are control into hybrid into push. And I actually don't know what map 4 is. We didn't, because that would necessitate a tiebreaker on hybrid specifically to actually come out. I would imagine it would, I mean, could be escort. It could just be go back to control. I don't know. I mean, if I was casting this weekend, I would certainly know that, but at this point, I just don't know. But I think that certainly opens up some opportunities for some interesting things to happen when you're talking about going like 1, 2, 3 on control hybrid into push. There is that is a different beast, I think, than what most Overwatch teams are used to facing.
I think it's also like you slyly put it like this, that you make this group stage first to 2, because I think you want to have a little bit more volatility in there.
Yeah, some upsets. Yep.
Some upsets, like facilitate that a little bit more. I get it from an organizational point of view as well, because like, let's be honest, having like a first to 3 would really like make those games
versus timeless or something. Yeah, like
that. Not just because of the stomps, but also just the production day just gets ridiculously long in comparison, right? So at that point, you have to almost think about like either having one more broadcast day. Maybe that's not even enough. It depends, right? Like,
yeah. Every time I see first to 2, I gotta shout out a LAN. Like it was like a random collegiate LAN that I was casting one time, and they had a Super Smash Bros. Guy do the rule set for Overwatch, and so they were doing first to 2 with a map pick ban system, and it was so sick. It was incredible. And I pray one day that somehow that is just like beamed into the heads of Overwatch people so that I get to see it again, because you can actually do it. And I think it eliminates a lot of the volatility out of the first to 2, and it makes things pretty playable for the teams.
Map drafts have always been something as something of a Christmas wish list item. I feel like maybe back in the day. I think, was there not like a weird like third-party tool that like some Alienwares used to use?
Yeah. We also used it back in 2016, 2017 for Academy Gaming. Wow, I should have been able to access that in my brain way faster than I did. But yeah, there was a tool. I don't know if it's still active. I can't imagine it's updated. But yeah, there was 2 tools that people did for map drafting, and it was used all the time in scrims, and we also used it in officials as well for broadcasts. Like I've played with it and I've casted while using it as well.
Yeah, I think for BO5 it's less necessary, but for BO3, I would love to see it implemented. That way, you just got to get out of the map pools that might favor particular teams.
Yep. And it opens up like another thing that like the desk and casters like you guys can obviously talk about, like map drafts and like over precedent, over the metas and all through the history. It's just like another like little lever to pull that can get people bought in and get people talking, because obviously Group A obviously having a crazy start to the event. But before we get too hastily into that, before we get into the fun, we do have to thank our patron producers. So episode 290 to 89. Is it 289 or is it 290? I don't know.
289,
know what it is.
I
think it's 289.
Wait, why do I know?
I don't know.
You want to host
this?
That's tough. You want to host this?
So yes, thank you to whatever episode it is. Thank you to Battle Crab, Refined Bean, Bronze Babu Hao, Picasso, Chris R34444, Kasha67, Lotion, Porkchop Sammy, Rexane, Unequaled King, Volamel, and Sugar High, and our YouTube members, I am DRW, Brother, Adam L, Sagi Fumi, Ice Jello, Fire Element 6, AK, and Chris R. Obviously, the talk of the town is Trick Room upsetting the San Francisco Shock pretty early in the event, right? 2-1, I think it was. Obviously, like, what a crazy story. We want to talk about like just fun upsets. Obviously, it's the preseason. How can you not talk about this? Like, I know I've been getting some side DMs from Heurix every once in a while talking about Trick Room, but like, was this expected? Was this? I know Malfel's on some interviews talking about how they're gonna eat him up, but like, what was your guys' kind of takeaway from that?
I thought if anybody was gonna do it, it was probably Trick Room. Of the 3 teams that we saw, they were just the most volatile coming out of the qualifier, and so to see them day one, yeah. I mean, I was already pretty high on them. I actually didn't realize how high Heurix was on Trick Room going into it, but yeah, that team clearly has the coordination and synergy kind of above what you would normally see of a top contenders team. And while they may not mechanically be able to outperform a lot of the OWL players against a San Francisco Shock that looked like they were all blindfolded and peg-legged, yeah, the coordination's going to be more than enough, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm same boat actually. I mean, coming into it,
A good one.
when we had nice. I actually didn't do that on purpose. Now I just realized I did that. But yeah, coming into the qualifiers, I was on. I'll be honest. I was a lot lower on Trick Room than obviously a lot of us ended up.
Sure.
When they wound up making it as far as they did in the qualifier. And looked as good as they did all the way through. I mean, there wasn't really any situation where, from the first time that we set our eyes on them, where we were like, "Oh, this is a fluke," because it genuinely, like, it was just really solid. Everything was cohesive, and they knew exactly what they were doing in this meta. And I think, to a large degree, it looked as though they were kind of the pioneers of some of the aspects of what we were getting from a lot of other teams in some cases as well. And it was made obvious at some stage later on that indeed was kind of the case. I mean, that's just the nature of playing for, 3-4 months longer than a lot of the other teams have. And that was the case as well last year with Wisp. It was kind of similar situation where that team had been playing, throughout the entire offseason. But you look at this one coming in, I'm glad I actually wasn't on last week, because I probably would have predicted Trick Room, and unfortunately I would have fallen short on that prediction, just for the sake of the fact that they brought something unique to the table that, and I think Custa mentioned this a little bit on the desk as well, that they are one of those teams, and there's another couple of teams from Contenders as well, that it's just a question of whether or not Overwatch League is ready in this moment. I think most people are going to say, and they would probably be right in saying, that Shock is a better team. Holistically, sure. Objectively, probably a better team.
Not that they.
Yeah. But like in this moment, the ability, and I think this is like obviously going back to what we talked about with First to Two, also just this being like a tournament like happening at the very beginning. There's a lot of volatility that can happen, and I think that Trick Room was a team that could play into that volatility very well with how composed they were and how ready they were for this meta and for this moment. And we also didn't see a lot of what we expected, or what we could have expected, rather. I don't know if we necessarily did expect it, but those jitters of being on the big stage think about being a Contenders player and going up against Proper and like some of these players that are coming out of Korea that are like being touted as like the next Himothy's, you know what I mean? Like these are big deals, and I don't think we saw Trick Room stumble, and I think that's a big reason why people kind of believed in them. But yeah, I mean, Shock just didn't look like Shock just yet. I think they're going to slowly become the Shock that we think they will be throughout the course of this tournament and going into the season. It may just take a little bit of time, but I think, in that moment, it was just ripe for Trick Room to take over.
I mean, it will also need a little bit of ping, right? Like if playing from Korea was playable, then we would have not needed Hawaii all these years, right? Like it's.
I think the ping argument on Shock losing that match is super cope, to be honest.
Really?
Like it wasn't just like, oh man, I can't hit my shots. Like Trick Room's not a team that beats you by hitting their shots more than you do. Like. Shock were just running around like cheese with their heads cut off. Positionally, it was a complete mess. And that's not something that even like 200 ping's gonna do to you. Like half the time, half the team was doing one thing, half the team's just like off twiddling their thumbs. Like it was. I think the analyst test, like, it was hard to break down for them because you can only beat up on an Overwatch League team of Shock's caliber so much after a performance like that because it's so jarring from what you expect. But I think they just played really badly on day one. And yeah, it's definitely getting better. Like I think that you can talk about that all you want of like Shock should improve. But I think day one, it probably made it harder to like just proper your way through things with the high thing. But I don't think they deserve the win at all.
No, that's fair. I think, like, especially in a coordinated way, I also just wonder how serious they take this, and then they realize, oh shit, we're like we can't outmuscle this and like have fun or whatever. The other thing is, like, it kind of makes me think, because like if Trick Room is the team that actually looked like they could legitimately get out, and they were the ones, I think, with the exception of Boat, if I'm not mistaken, that like were playing together for the most part. There's something to be said about timing for this event, or like locking signings or something like this, right? Because generally speaking, also just like thinking about next year. Like, teams in this current climate will not sign players very early in the offseason, right? They will always take a long time, especially the teams that will end up signing, like an NA and EU talent, will wait as long as possible, and then, you know, rip these contenders teams apart, and you kind of take the ability for them to rebuild and like find anything fun there, right? Like, or like, you know, really mount an offense against the OWL team. So I don't know what that means. I understand, like, it's sort of like framed as a preseason event. Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should be a talent exhibition event where you close down the signing window until after Pro-Am, and it's like your sort of like scouting window where you sort of show these talents still in their right environment, and then they pop off against teams. I'm not sure how motivated.
Is this the Valiant rule that you're discussing now? Is that
yeah?
We're gonna
It's not
debit
just
that.
the Valiant, right? It's the Valiant, it's the Justice, it's the, you know, like basically nobody has signed a 6 yet, like seemingly. So there's certain aspects here that just made it a little harder for contenders teams to compete, and I think it's already like systemically probably the hardest year for contenders teams to be strong. Also looking towards
In the West, especially, yeah.
Yeah, but also kind of in the East, to be fair, as well. So like I think we just have to adjust timing or rule sets to that in order to give contenders teams the best chance, because I feel like for the most part, yes, it is about like genuine competition, but it's also showing off new talent, right, in some way. And if we can facilitate that somehow with, you know, signing window closing or like timing of the event or something like this, or other clever, like I'm open to other suggestions how you could bring that about, where you can give contenders teams a little bit more stability in order to compete.
I think something to the tune of like, hey, you can sign a player, but their ability to participate with their team in the Pro-Am isn't affected, kind of thing. Wouldn't be too surprising. That being said, I mean, I don't think it affected at least the first 2 groups all that much. I don't think it'll affect the second groups too much right now. Like, losing CJ was probably the biggest hit that we saw of everybody, but I would argue that at least rosters wise, the biggest hit that we saw to NA contenders teams was just Odyssey failing to sign up. Which put a huge wrench in things in terms of the standings, in terms of who we thought was going to actually make it.
Right. Yeah.
I guess the other kind of talk of the town, maybe, obviously Checkmate getting a ton of love with the Florida Mayhem advancing first in Group A. Is this something that you kind of expected to see? Did you kind of assume that Merit was going to kind of take the spotlight here, Dor?
I didn't expect Merit. Like, Merit, I think the meta is very much falling into his lap. The Cassidy is something that he's just very, very, very good at. And when you invest resources into Merit's Cassidy, it seems to just spit out more somehow. But it's really the coordination with this team that looks so incredible. And Checkmate came in for the interview and just talked about it pretty candidly, saying, yeah, we feel like we're working together a lot better. Our communication is getting significantly improved, and that's pretty much all you can ask for. If a team is coming in with plenty of that same synergy from last season and saying, hey, we've improved on it, and then just bolstering that roster with a meta that falls pretty well into their wheelhouse, yeah, man, you expect a big performance like this. So maybe it wasn't the Giga 4-0 that we got where they're just like trash stomping everybody, but hey, I'll take it. They look great, man.
Agreed. Jerks, any big takeaways from Mayhem for you?
Well, for me, I mean, you probably know this, and everybody probably doesn't know this about me, but I think you do, that I am a massive Someone fan, have been for a very, very, very long time. I can remember back in, I think I actually brought this up on the broadcast very briefly, that there was a mock tryout, got it, a year and a half ago, something like that John did. Huge respect to John for pulling this off, by the way. It was a lot to take on. But effectively, it was just a ton of talent that had fallen out of Overwatch League or that were looking to get into Overwatch League, and it was just a metric. Not going to cuss to that degree. Do you guys cuss on this? Is that a thing?
Yeah, no.
I think
go ahead.
yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay, it was a metric fuck ton of players from NA and EU or rather EMEA, and it was just like a big kind of collective group of all these like crazy talent. Someone wound up coming over because John did manage to get some talent from both China, well, just various regions within APAC, so China, Korea, Australia, and the like. Someone happened to be one of those players and came in, was expected to kind of like need a translator for the most part, but I think communicated fantastically in English. And we saw a lot of Winston. I actually just wound up following him around in a lot of his lobbies and sitting in on some of the discussions like afterwards, some of the reviews and stuff like that. I thought someone, and I remember I messaged out to a group chat we're in, Joe, that I was like, someone like this is the player to keep an eye on for sure. This is the one player like coming out of today. This is the one I'm the most excited about because I was so like deeply embedded into NA and EMEA at the time that I didn't get to see very much of someone back in like 2020, 2021 when people were first starting to get looks on him. And I thought it was unfortunate that in 2022 we didn't get to see him become what I expected him to become, but it feels like this year actually is going to be the year where he meets that potential that I think a lot of people now are seeing him as having.
Yeah. That's for sure. And to kind of support that point, I did a little bit of, reaching out prior, I think, to the 2021 season, or it might have been the COVID years have got my brain twisted.
Yeah, same.
But I do remember talking to Heurix, and specifically someone was like the name underlined a few different times. Like this is the guy to look out for. The comms are great. Everything, a lot of what he just said, he told me, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll, check out someone. And yeah, no, kid is a unicorn for sure. And I think, yeah, like you're saying, a lot of people saw that last year. Yiska, any Mayhem love to give?
I feel like it's nice to see that Checkmate is sort of having his moment at the moment. I think like for the longest time, everyone, like when I talked to other teams, even last season, I feel like everyone brought up there's two elite players on the Mayhem, and that's Checkmate and someone. I think he already showed it last year. I still feel like there was this, meme aspect of the season before where they just put him in on tank.
Line.
I think that's something that Albert said they regret not trying him out on DPS earlier, right? So I think like this is almost slowly becoming his team in some ways. When it felt like it should be someone's team. And we'll see how this develops, but I personally didn't necessarily have Checkmate as like, an elite tracer on my radar as to, be the guy that wins you the games against top teams, right? And I feel like this is more and more mounting a serious offense where it's a weird position for the Mayhem because in some ways you think like they are probably like reasonably budgeted, but that might not even be the case. They just like picked up smartly. But then again, we'll try to do the budget tier list. But I think they played this offseason very well in what kind of talent they were able to amass. They realized that there was going to be an influx of talent there. They played their cards right. I think, honestly, I think Merit even underperformed a little bit in aggregate over this weekend.
So, yeah.
That's a play I'm mildly concerned about if that's just like a Soldier and Cassidy thing.
Yeah,
but we'll see. Like if I think there are a lot of metas where this team is just like rock solid on, and even Chorong. Like I think that like. After such a season he had before, where he came in like this as this hyped rookie, like very well paid, and now is in that position to play on a little bit of more of a underdog team, but like maybe they shouldn't be. It's an interesting lineup for sure, and I think like while it is probably, we'll see, isn't exactly London budgeted, that's still your team that could definitely like hit the top 5, maybe a little bit higher even, right?
Could. That's I mean, you want to talk about like merit, maybe not necessarily having such a deep hero pool, definitely been a criticism that he's kind of gotten levied in the past, that being a little bit inconsistent, but kind of playing on that third DPS slot. Sana, granted, it was just a map. There's some good shit there. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Random Finn coming in, looking all right. I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, in theory, Sana should fill the gaps for his team pretty well.
Yeah.
It's a big in theory thing, but if he's able to, it takes the team definitely up a notch.
Yeah. I think one of the main concerns that people were having when they were seeing that Mayhem roster like being announced in the first place was, okay, how does it make sense with Rupel and Sana in here? What are they bringing here to make sense for this to be a mixed roster, right? Because that is gonna offer up some concerns with regards to communication. I think a lot of those concerns have probably been mitigated, if not completely thrown out at this stage, given how well they did in their group. Obviously, we'll have to see how they do when it comes time for the bracket, but I think they performed very, very well. Rupel was exceptional, I think, in literally every map that we saw. I mean, I would have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb to find some stuff maybe that could use some improvement for the team as a whole, but like overall, I think Rupel played fantastically. And for that one map, I think it's a good sign that Sana came in and was playing as well as he did on Tracer specifically. Now I think it's less of a concern of can Sana play for a lot of people. I think a lot of us that have seen Sana for the last couple of years didn't have that concern at all of can he play. It's now when will he play? and that I think is a question that obviously Mayhem is still figuring out as well. I mean, when we talked to Sana, it was exactly that was the case. That it's just a question of what and when, and that's it.
I think there is a player that can fill the gaps, play that like whatever you want, coach. I'm here to learn it. Like Sana's certainly up on that list.
Definitely kind of sets them apart. It's definitely one of those criticisms that you can kind of levy against, I know maybe Yiska and I, and maybe some of you guys maybe differ on this, but like Houston in a like double or like a hit scan tracer meta where it's like, okay, or maybe even like a flex hit scan or a flex tracer meta where it's, maybe a Genji tracer or an Echo tracer. And it's like, okay, well, do we really want Merit to kind of goof around on the tracer a little bit? We have Sana, he's there. Maybe there's a Sombra meta, even though we saw Checkmate play that. Maybe Sombra, comes in and plays opposite to Checkmate on this hypothetical Sombra thing. Like it is, like you said, I think Dor mentioned this, like in theory, it makes a lot of sense. Like it works. And seeing them not only trust Sana to come in, but him actually, perform well. And, granted, again, it was just a map.
He flew in that day, right?
Torbash. Bring back Orisa Torbash. That's where we. I guess now it wouldn't be Orisa. It would be like Sigma Torbash. Yeah. But hey, that would be a perfect opportunity to bring back. Bring back Sana, man. Perfect opportunity.
Yeah, and I feel like it was said somewhere that he flew in that day, and they just put him on
day before. Day before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's also very impressive. There's also implies probably not super. Like a ton of scrim time on at least.
I don't think he had any. Yeah. I think he had. No, I don't think he had
zero scrim time.
Yeah, zero scrims. Yeah.
Jeez.
He talked about it in the interview. We were making jokes about him unpacking his suitcase on broadcast. Like, as fresh as they come.
Actually, just fresh off the plane coming in and just dropping a heater of a map. You got to give it to him. Speaking of heaters, now Yiska may cringe at this. I don't know. Sugarfree did finally have a bit of an Overwatch League debut. I thought he looked pretty hype, but
you mean Lenny?
Lenny, Sugarfree, speedily, depending on who you ask. We'll have to see. Heurix, obviously, I think the both of you have been covering him for a long time, but coming up, waiting for the boy to get his dues. Do you think he lived up expectations?
I think
that's a hard question. That's a hard question to answer, I feel like.
Okay.
I think Sugarfree got a decent amount of respect he deserves. Like there's certainly a density of strong DPS players in that group in particular, so it's hard to stand out. Especially in the Tracer realm. But Sugarfree, I thought, did at least make the mark. And now, especially after watching the Team USA closed trials, I'm just like high on Aspire because I just watched 4 hours of Aspire dumpstering kids. That's for another day. Aspire didn't perform in the Pro-Am the same way he did.
I was like, okay, you got to sell me on Aspire because I did not care for him this event.
No, like Pro-Am, it wasn't there, and then he just like goes and is shitting on people and pugs for 4 hours straight. So I don't know what's happening, but I'm real high on him right now. But it didn't happen in Pro-Am, so I imagine Vancouver Titans find more success if Aspire plays like he did in those trials and Sugarfree does.
Yeah.
But as far as it stands right now, like Sugarfree is very good. Is the rest of this team good enough to back him up and create wins? I don't think on a consistent basis, no.
Based. Joe. You want to start calling me Lord now?
No, absolutely not. Listen,
you told me about this actually.
Yes, I have Vancouver Titans. So for those who don't know, even though I feel like we bring it up on like every show, but I do have a bet with Yiska, a Lord bet. That the Vancouver Titans will end the season in NA 7th or higher, and the winner of the bet, the loser, has to refer to them as Lord for X amount of weeks, days. So I technically am undefeated in Lord bets. Thank you, Base Chengdu Hunters, for the season 2 crowning of your 1-0 Lord. But going from the group with the St. Louis Sombra into the group with just the Sombra. Group B, Atlanta Reign, looking as dominant as I think everybody expected. Is there really anything to take away other than maybe a lot of Ramatra?
Yeah, they're just good.
They are kind of built different.
You see this roster, it's like, I think they also did a pretty good job of choosing the right players to spend money on. Right? Sure. With the likes of Lip and such. I think Feeler coming in is really good. Vigilante, sick choice. The only thing I want to know is like, how much can this team improve? How much have they improved? Like, what's going on? Because Gator's coaching, in theory, language barrier should be like at least a decent thing, but they looked well coordinated and they looked well executed. If anything, I expected them to like try and come in and just beat people over the head with the mechanics stick, but they looked well coordinated. I'm like, for a mixed coach to roster verbiage, how'd they pull that off so quickly, or was it just a fluke? Are they just like actually just naturally playing that well together? And how much can it improve with the language barrier in coaching?
That was 100% a little bit of genius. Yes. That was 100% one of the big like criticisms that I had as like Gator and this front office was building this roster. I'm like, bro, I don't know how your guys are gonna like get like the big Overwatch picture stuff in like review to like soak into like the player brains, and then they go and grab Wizard Young, and it's like, okay, this makes way more sense. He's like very communicative, if not fluent in English. Obviously has a ton of time coaching Korean players and working in Korea, obviously Korean. That's where I feel like a lot of that gap is being bridged. On top of that, these are just world class players. Like this is the year, if Atlanta's ever going to make it to a title, like this is it for sure.
Yeah, I just can't overestimate what kind of deals they got with specifically Vigilante and Stalker. Like now we're coming into the season, even just before Pro-Am, like everyone's like, oh my god, like I can't wait to watch Stalker and Vigilante because like they've got the talent but haven't had the opportunity to like really show it off. And like lo and behold, they're just two of the best players. I mean, everyone in Atlanta is one of the best players that we've seen. So you can't say like the best if it's overpopulated by Atlanta players. But nevertheless, I think those two in particular, they add a ton to the roster, and I would imagine it's like it's not a big spend for Atlanta. At least this season, after each of them had some time to marinate in the league. So yeah, it's a well put together roster, and then it's also an incredibly strong roster.
It's almost an embarrassment of riches. It was also kind of nice to see that they incorporated Hawk, like this rotation that they're attempting there, especially like with the language barrier and everything in place. That seemed to work. The other takeaway I had from those games was like, yes, Proper is probably still your go-to favorite for MVP this season, just because he's Proper. But Lip has a serious shot. Like this is definitely also the year. Like he's now on the, stage where reasonably more eyes are on now. And if he can just deliver and like succeed in the stronger region, and also do it against Proper more frequently, then that's definitely building his MVP case. And I feel like that's a long time coming as well, right? Like this guy,
oh for sure.
I don't think there's a player that has been consistently as good in the last, since he's gotten into the league pretty much, and has kept that level of eliteness for as long. So yeah,
even if you nitpick and like the only thing that really jumps out is like the beginning of like the Sojourn like heat train, that like everybody is just running Sojourn, and like you couldn't really I think this was still like beta Overwatch 2, so you couldn't necessarily like grind it on ladder. That's probably the only thing on like Shanghai you could really nitpick and be like, yeah, Sojourn back then wasn't really good. But the second, you give him some time, he comes out and looks absolutely like just world beating, just MVP caliber. And yeah, like there's not much else. Obviously, like being an astronomically statistical monster when it comes to like tracer performances a couple years back. Sombra, I don't need to explain it. Like, yeah, Lip is a beast. Lip's Timothy, if we're gonna go back to that.
Heurix, I did in terms of like him players as well, Lip's got a really unique hero pool.
Oh, for sure. No,
that's probably the biggest tool that you've got, because there's a million tracer players that can do it.
Yes.
Right. At this point, if you're one of the top 8 teams, you've got one of those tracer players, and you're going to be perfectly fine. The fact that Lip has things in his back pocket like the Sombra and basically anything else that you might still want a player in his role to do, I think adds a lot of value to him.
No, 100%. And that was kind of like the big meme in like our little watch parties. I was like, guys, I don't know. Like, is it crazy to say that Pummy's the second best Sombra that is at this event like right now? Like, this is kind of nuts. Like, this guy's kind of
broadcast multiple times. I'm like, literally outside of Lip, there's nobody else who's doing this, who's like putting any sort of specialization into such a powerful hero. And it's one of the like Shanghai running ball comp, right? Like why that works is because you have a Lip. And then, oh god, dude, I'm getting flashbacks. It was yesterday or the day before. I was watching the USA World Cup trials, and like, oh my god, they played Ball Sombra Tracer for 2 whole maps, and I wanted to pull my organs out for 2 whole maps. Like, I have witnessed things that no man should see by Sombras in those games, and I'm like, oh my god, it like Pummy is literally the best Sombra NA. Like I joked about it on broadcast, but there's literally nobody else.
Yeah, wasn't good last year, and I don't expect it to be any of it. That was what was so surprising. Doing some of the like the VOD review, Kenobi and some friends and the community did a little bit of VOD reviewing when it came to getting a feel for Trick Room and stuff. And I was like, yo, yeah, you're right. You're gassing up this guy's Sombra, and like Affected's got this ball, and I'm like, it's kind of good. I'm like, okay, like these guys can play, and they definitely showed up. But to kind of get back to Group B for a second, I did want to kind of open up this question because this was another thing that kind of had me stirred a little bit. Did we kind of overestimate Wrecking Ball a little bit here, or did we sleep a little bit on Ramatra? Is that maybe just a dumb take from me?
We definitely slept on. I think everyone slept on Ramatra. I think there was some discussion in the qualifiers towards the end that there was maybe some potential, and this happened even after the qualifiers. It was starting to ramp up a little bit as well, but more behind the scenes, that there was some opportunity to see some Ramatra, but I don't think that anybody anticipated outside of like, okay, it's like play week, like we're getting into things, and it's like, okay, now it's becoming more obvious that Ramatra was just a really, really solid choice. And I think a lot of teams fell into it for 2 specific reasons. That it is something that players that don't necessarily specialize in Rhine can play, and to have a great effect on it as well. And then B, the only time where you really want to be playing things like Reinhardt are on Reinhardt maps. And when you get forced to a Reinhardt map, the best thing that you can do if you can't mirror the Rein is to counter it. And one of the best ways right now to play something similar that has opportunity to counter, I won't call it a hard counter because I don't know that it necessarily is, but it has opportunity to counter because of the way that Ramatra works with that kind of big tempo shift when you get Nemesis and Annihilation and that stuff. That you do have the opportunity to just say, okay, well, we're going to use this as a specialist map, and we're just going to bring in our off tank, and we can have things like Diva comps that work pretty well, and then we can have Ramatra comps that work very well as well on, maps like King's Row is a good one. Antarctic Peninsula is one that we expected to see more Ramatras on as well. It just works out well if you don't want to play the Rein. Obviously, the Rein comp is still solid. Teams like Spitfire are going to be probably continuing to prove that. But Ramatra is just a great example of a hero that went under the radar because it wasn't spearheading a meta. It just became like the echo after the fact. And then with Ball, I think there are still a lot of great examples that Ball is still very good and playable, but there aren't as many teams that are wanting to commit to it because you have teams like Rain who could, but I love the Rain comps that they've been coming out with because that's the other thing. Rain, let's be real, wasn't playing like quote meta. Like they weren't. They were playing a lot of things that were more attuned to what they play, where you saw things like what was it? Zen Bap comps. You saw Zen
that
Anna
Blizzard World comp against Saints was crazy.
Yeah, Diva.
That looks so good.
Yeah, it was what Diva, like Hawk Diva, and then you had the Lip Sombra, Stalker on Tracer, and then Vigilante and Fielder were on Zen, and I think Fielder was Bap and then went Anna, if I'm not mistaken, but for the most part was on Anna.
That's a Bap, yeah.
And yeah, you saw that Zen Bap coming up a lot. Like they even played it on Hollywood. I think there's a lot more versatility to this meta than a lot of people gave it credit for, coming both into qualifiers and then into the group stage as well. And I think we're going to still see a little bit more of that going even into Group C. We'll probably talk more about that, but there is a lot more diversity in this meta than people expected, and I think the greater community still expects.
Yeah, that's for sure. Anything coming out of the stock exchange, Yiska? Anything? Are we a little bit more Ramatra favored, or what does the universe say?
I mean, does it really? I'll be honest. Like, I haven't kept up on scrims just like during Pro-Am, but like we'll see a massive meta shift. I think.
Sure, of course.
Season start. So
yeah, no, 100%.
I mean, this is honestly, I don't even think it's a hot take. Like the Reinhardt player is just going extinct. It's a tough thing to see, especially from someone who likes seeing it so much. But like, I think it's a simple case of like, Ram's fine enough, and Rein takes too much specialization.
Yeah,
it's a similar thing of like, we've got Winston comps, which are like for a lot of these teams not too hard to get into, versus ball comps that require just like however much time and dedication to that specific composition. It's like, I think we got a lot of it in Pro-Am qualifier because Contenders just has Rein players, right? But Overwatch League teams don't buy Rein players right now because Rein players are too specialized, and it makes me sad. But when Ram's gonna do just as well,
hurting Ben Best's feelings right now. I mean,
okay,
you better watch that tongue.
Would you call Ben Best a Rein player anymore?
Maybe not anymore, but
okay.
I think the way that he plays definitely is defined by the fact that he did play Rein.
Yeah.
Even when we saw him playing other brawl comps like Junker Queen last year, he was very much a Rein player playing Junker Queen, if that makes sense.
But, yeah, going back to the stock market though, I think it's just a factor of like there just aren't Rein players floating around. Like the teams that can play Rein will play Rein. Teams that can't play Rein are just gonna keep picking Ramatra because it's easier to shift to for their tank players who are used to rotating cooldowns. So yeah. And then Ball I don't think was like underhyped. I think teams just aren't good enough to play ball comps and don't have good Sombra players. So it's like why would I do
you
that?
need both. Yeah, you definitely
exactly. You need what seems like a perfect storm considering that there's no good Sombra players available.
Yeah.
And then also a ball specialist. Like, nah, it's just It's not.
Where's
not a
Hacker at, by
realistic
the way?
picture for
This is a
while.
great. This is a great moment for Hacker to come back.
I don't know. I mean, after last season, I don't know if homie just, I don't know Overwatch. She doesn't go to this school. Eesh. Yeah, he would obviously do extremely well, and it is kind of weird that I'm trying to like recall some of the APAC VODs that I have seen, or the Korean VODs rather, that I have seen, and I don't know that they're also running a ton of Sombra. Still a lot of Tracer, still some hit scan in there, some cast, some Sojourn, but not a metric boatload of Sombra. But that's kind of we'll have to see with that. Obviously,
what was it? Korean Contenders was running like hog for the longest time. I'm past trusting the Korean meta. I feel like there's so much cope of like, oh my, whenever there's a lack of meta or like not any pro play, everyone starts pointing towards Korean Contenders like, oh, this is what they're playing over there. Yeah. And I just think of that meme that is like thing from Japan. It's like meta from Korea, I don't buy it. I don't buy that there's just like meta knowledge over there, some sacred forbidden, like it ends up being some completely different thing from what everybody expects. Yeah, it's different.
Anyways. That's the point, right? Like I think APAC in general is like a region that I think we'll probably just see underlined again this year. Is just not, I don't know if they don't like it or if they're just like philosophically
they're usually later to brawls for sure. So if it is a brawl meta, they'll be later to it because they'll typically play things like dive instead.
Yep. And I think just historically we've seen that they were very late to goats, and when they were on goats, I had Wolf in my mentions, and I called the region geriatric, but that's what it is. They're a little bit slower to adapt to it. I still think
I don't think it's because they're dumb, by the way. I think it's just because they'd rather play dive.
I hate to like razor that down to like, I just don't think they want to play Ryan. I think it's so simple. They just don't like Ryan Overwatch.
I mean, it's weird. You see regionally different heroes come out like the same way. NA doesn't have ball or Sombra players. KRCN generally doesn't have like May players, right? And so I think there's a little bit of a vacuum in regards to specific heroes that puts a handicap on them running particular compositions because of their lack of favoritism in those regions.
Yep, definitely a big. Well, I think Yiska was just not like a huge talking point. Like when we do, or what ball meta was it? Where we're just like, oh yeah, Apex's gonna be like so far ahead. They got all the ball practice. NA doesn't have ball players. Like, what are you gonna get? Like, there's the regional divide is very real. It's kind of crazy. But to kind of wrap up Group B, there's.
Do we have to talk about them?
Without punching down, right? Obviously, the Vegas Eternal did lose to a Los Angeles Valiant roster that was signed maybe an hour before. That is a little depressing. I don't know if I necessarily want to completely light the torch and throw it away. Hopefully, Vegas can get it together. Fingers crossed. But Saints obviously advancing out of the qualifiers in NA as the top seed. For you two, did this roster kind of live up to expectations? Obviously, there was some shuffling going on. But all in all,
Valiant.
Saints.
Okay. Saints?
Yeah. Did they kind of live up for you guys?
I think after losing CJ, this was what I hoped for.
Okay.
At the very least. I think Tree had a few slow starts. Like, this was definitely a team that had a lot of pressure on them to perform, and they were putting a lot of pressure on themselves, unfortunately.
Sure.
Like, dude, Trick Room was coming in. There was a reason they were in match chat. They could not give two shits about what was going on. And that was just their mentality. They were just here to have fun and play Overwatch.
Sure, yeah. Nobody expected them to get here.
And Saints were like, we're going to beat the Overwatch League. We're going to show them that we can play. And like, I think that's good. I think it's fine to have that competitive mindset. But boy, it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself and then lose a player with that mentality. So I think they did about as well as I thought they would, given all that, and had strong enough showings. I mean, Spitfire's a tough one, right? Like you really want to be able to take that over and like maybe be the team that does it. But like I was talking about earlier, I don't think being necessarily the best contenders team wins you a qualification spot. I think it did come a lot down to volatility.
Sure.
And that's tough to have in a group where you have the Atlanta Reign.
course, you're basically competing for like that second seed.
Exactly.
I'm gonna give you this. If they do keep CJ, do you think they can make it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I actually do, because
they squeak past Spitfire and steal the spot. I think
exactly like Squid. By the final maps that we saw him on, looked really good.
exceptional. Yeah,
The first 2 or 3 games was a bit of a non-factor, and when you're talking about going from CJ, somebody who was like producing at least 40% of this team's first picks, like that is a really big difference. It's hard to overestimate. Like, you look at this roster, especially from a Contender's perspective, and it is stacked to the brim. But Heurix and I have been saying it since day one. It's like, if there's 2 people on this team that actually are the carries, it was CJ and Tree, and at least 50% of that, I mean, it's just rough.
Yeah, I think Saints, to me, is a team that, like, they kind of knew where they were going into it, I think. I mean, we even had, I want to say in the final, like the grand final interview, was we were just kind of asking about expectations. And I could be wrong on that interview, but either way, we were talking to them about it. And we were asking them a little bit about expectations, and the biggest note that they had was, well, if we have our support line, we expect to do very well. Like top 4 would be where we're aiming in this tournament. If it's not, then we're gonna go there and do our best, but we'll have to see. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but like as well as Squid did, and I don't want to downplay what the performance that Squid had, because I think Squid played fantastically.
Agreed.
There is an element that was missing there by not having CJ. It's hard to define exactly what that means, because it comes down to, obviously, just like the individual play potential that CJ can have. CJ has a tremendous amount of carry potential, but moreover, what it brought to the team and the level of synergy that this team had together, especially with Vega, and how grounded they could be in each match. They definitely lost a little bit of that, and then trying to spend a little bit of time to catch Squid up to where they're at and how they're performing, what their objectives are, what their comps are. That puts you a little bit of a step back, and then you have to retake that. But yeah, they were already really close to getting a spot. I think people aren't giving them enough credit for the fact that they almost got out of a group that featured Rain and Spitfire. And let's be honest, Spitfire is a good team. Let's not downplay the Spitfire. So I think that is a great job. I think, coming in and going 2-2 in Group B with Rain, just in general with Rain, I think there's a lot to be proud of for them, for sure.
It also makes it all the more depressing to watch. I think CJ underperformed on the Valiant as well. I mean, I don't think it's an environment where you're expected to do well. So I like you. There are a million ways to cope about this, right? With everything that's being said that's going on or whatever, like all the just jank shit with the Valiant. You can't expect him to do well, but I am sad because we have laid out the red carpet and tooted all the horns for CJ, and he just wasn't given the tools to have that first day that I think he deserved.
I still think Seeker and CJ will likely have their moments this year.
Oh yeah,
in time. Yeah, I hope so.
I mean, let's be honest. If the Valiant are gonna crawl out of a hole and you bite, I feel like Dan Campbell to any NFL heads talking about like the Detroit Lions coming into like last season, the same way that I feel about the Valiant, where it's just like if we are gonna bite a kneecap off and then bite a hamstring and then grab your arm and rip that off and like just tooth and nail every single game, it's gonna be
fight for it all. Yeah.
If they can get to that point, it's gonna be off the back of Seeker and CJ. Who, again, like you talk to anybody in any contender, CJ is definitely a name up there. Seeker last year showed he could compete on Boston a little bit. Again, not a team that necessarily gave him the utmost opportunity to perform, but when he did, there were some things to like. It wasn't completely write offable. It wasn't.
Quick detour, actually, if you don't
detour
mind.
Away.
Can we please stop using bad situations that players get into as prime only thing to look at type examples for what their potential is. Because if that was the case, then Hottie is a terrible player, and we know that's not true. And there are so many players that fall into this where it's like, oh, they didn't perform well in this shit fucking, ecosystem with a shit situation, no opportunity. And it's like, of course they weren't spectacular. Of course they weren't otherworldly in those situations. If the team is playing poorly or things aren't working out behind the scenes, of course there is going to be a downturn in their play, but that doesn't mean that that's what they're capable of long term. And I think we also saw a little bit of a bright moment for a player like Wub had a couple of incredibly bright spots throughout his time in Group A with Timeless, and that was another player that was just in a situation last year that didn't really offer the kind of opportunity that he needed to be able to shine. And there's still situations that we keep, like, as a community getting into where we're like, oh, that player, we write them off. They weren't good in this one situation. That means they're bad forever and always. And it's a big surprise when they come in and they perform so well. I mean, someone is probably going to get the exact same treatment this year. So
checkmate, yeah.
Yeah, checkmate, another prime example. I mean, how many times are we going to go through this before people realize, oh, you know what? Maybe the situation does matter. All right, D2, we're done. I'm sorry.
No, that's the reason why this exists. We do
Can
love
we
a
say
detour.
that about the Vegas Eternal, actually?
What, that the situation last year was not, or less than ideal? Speak charitably.
Is that cope available
not
to
at all.
them? Like, I'm looking at this season as well.
Oh,
Like, I honestly, I couldn't care less that the Vegas Eternal went 0-4 in this group. Like, you take a team and you take a coach and you're like, okay, this coach is going to improve our team, and then you give them like a month, if that, and it's like, okay, you can't expect that much.
They started screaming pretty early though, and that makes me concerned.
I would imagine they did. Yeah. That's that checks
They
out.
did scrim early, and I do, to play a little bit of a devil's advocate for Vegas. They do have like very particular players. Let's say Vulcan, I don't think is bad, but I don't know that he's up to snuff on the heroes that you need him to this stage.
Meta. Yeah.
And
it's like you saw them swap the comfort like every single time.
Hollywood A was just comfort.
Yeah.
I'm telling you though, if there's a meta where it's gonna be Brig Bap with Sigma, and then it's like, I don't know, maybe what do we want for Devin Malthel? What do we want
for Malthel? Let's just address the elephant in the room.
Hell yeah.
You can, I feel like it's Genji, right?
Yeah, Genji, Farah Solid. If you maybe I talked about this last year. I'm not sure how realistic the shot is. Malthel in the past was a genuinely good Doomfist player.
Okay.
And there was like this thought, because it was happening a couple times, obviously Dante being like the premier one, where you see these DPS players going over and playing some tank picks. Dante has
Heurix. That would require the Vegas Eternal picking up a sixth player.
Yeah, that's
actually.
Yeah, Vulcan goes over to DPS now. Yeah. So I don't know exactly how realistic that kind of thing is. At this point, it's 0% because of the situation with their roster.
Yeah.
But certain flex picks, I think Malthel has in the past been very good at. And we've also seen a couple of funny hero looks like Junk Torb, and we even saw Torb in this tournament already from him. So yeah, there's a couple of metas where I actually would expect Vegas to look pretty good. Maybe not like top 4 good, but I think it would be a victory for them if they were able to get, just roll the dice on a meta that just is at least decent for them and be able to finish top half. And I think that there is certainly a few timelines, a few realities where they could realize that potential for sure.
Oh, 100%. I think like circling back to like the map order and the fact that this is a best of 2, I would suspect that Vegas is probably going to have, with the roster they have now, probably a lot of success at Escort. You have Shambali, you have Circuit. Like, these are maps that are going to play into like this kind of odd support pick that, this team kind of has inherently. And then Vulcan being on like a signature pick in Sigma, like these are just things that's going to be expected of you. So it plays within your wheelhouse. So I would expect them to kind of do okay at this. And then obviously if you get the meta dice roll, they'll be at least serviceable. Again, I don't know how well things are going to go, but there is an out in on the table for the gamble team. Yiska, anything for you?
What do you guys think? Because like they have to sign a 6th player, right? Like I don't know. They have been weird on Twitter. I'm not sure how to read this. I haven't looked into it, but like they've been flirting with Rhino. Do you guys think that could help this team?
I mean, could a 6th player help the team that's stuck in the bad meta? Like, yeah, of course. I think any main tank player worth their salt right now, followed by maybe a Lucio player, and you're kind of there in terms of things you might want. Like Luke Mino might not be the world's greatest Ana or Kiriko, but it's more than serviceable. And then yeah, I think once you have a Lucio and a main tank that you're comfortable communicating within this team, and I think it might actually be better to double down and go to like just contenders to pick up a main tank that these players have kind of gotten used to playing alongside. That way there's no kind of communication error in that regard. You're like instantly doubling this team's capability, because like we're talking about, it's like, oh, if the meta dice rolls in their favor, it's like, okay, well, who are the 2 players right now that's actually a problem for? And it's Vulcan and Rack Attack, who just aren't particularly flexible, have hero pools that take them out of a lot of what we've seen in Overwatch 2. So I think if you can fill those 2 particular roles, give this team the flexibility that it needs, all of a sudden it's a very different one. Is it a top 8 team? Is it a top 5 team? I don't know, but definitely a mid-pack team.
It can at least compete.
Take that volatility out of it. Yeah.
I actually wouldn't even go that approach myself personally. I think like obviously attacking like the big elephant in the room, which is the fact that, you know, half of the tanks are kind of like covered at a super high level right now. Like again, not to knock Vulcan because he's very good at what he is good at. But you know, there are definitely some gaps there in his hero pool on a very, very important role right now in Overwatch 2. And you're not always going to get the opportunity to, you know, lean into a diverse meta and be able to play things that are more to your comfort. Sometimes you might be forced into a situation where you'll have to play something like Rhine or maybe Wrecking Ball or something like that, and everything else is just worse. That may happen. I'm not going to say it will happen, but it might happen. But on the other side of the coin, I don't think I would just dive in on Lucio personally, because I think Rack Attack can play a serviceable Lucio. We saw him spend a lot of time actually building that up throughout the course of last year. It was actually a primary concern of his when he was trying to find a spot into the Overwatch League. So he spent a lot of time on that. But on the other side there too, Luke Mino also played Lucio in collegiate as well. That was another thing that he did play. So that is something that they can both maybe fall back on. I think Rax Lucio did get a lot better actually, to the point where I wouldn't be like, obviously he's not Funny Astro. We're not going to all lie to ourselves and say that. As much as I love Rack Attack as a person, he knows that he's not Funny Astro. It is what it is. But I think going for the tank first and then maybe waiting for meta and seeing, you know, what kind of holes do you need immediately to fill, and then diving in on whatever that may be, whether it is like, okay, maybe we need another you know, support, whether it be a Lucio or another flex support, or hey, do we want to go the route of filling out our DPS a little bit so we have a little bit more structure with that? That's probably the approach I would have, and I think most GMs would probably go for that same route, because they don't want to bring someone into the team and then wind up not using them and still needing someone for a meta down the line.
Can I get a quick litmus test if I throw out a name?
Okay.
Yeah. What do we feel about Gig?
I really like Gig.
I like Gig, and I like Gig with that roster.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it's like it slots in perfectly with Vulcan. And the dude's also
don't go Rhino,
pretty good. If you don't go Rhino,
I think Rhino makes more sense for them.
Unless he's like baiting. Like,
what's that? Sorry.
Rhino said he was stepping away from competitive for a while, unless he's just baiting. Yeah. I mean, there's a chance. I think Rhino and Gig also fill similar roles, but also I think the maturity of Gig is not a factor as well.
Can you pull?
I think he brings
Gig
a lot socially to a team.
Can you pull Gig away from his situation in collegiate?
That's also a pretty good quiz. Like, that's why I just rounded out and didn't consider Mikey a factor, is because like Mikey chose collegiate, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Gig could very well do the same thing. Rhino could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just a matter if a team gives him an offer or a scholarship. So, yeah, tough question to answer. But I do think Gig is not a bad shout as far as active players to fill that role.
Sure.
Definitely,
for sure. Yeah, in my mind, I'm just like, if I'm Gig and I do want to re-enter the Overwatch League, I'm not betting my return on this team.
Them go 0-4.
Yeah, that one's rough. Not the best outlook as it stands now. We're gonna have to see. Maybe Vegas gets like a top deck Reiner. Maybe Rhino is coming. Maybe that's on the river. I'm really trying to find as many poker puns as I can jam pack this team full of. Because outside of that, not my favorite games of Overwatch I've ever seen. I will say that. But Group B, done and dusted. Now we're getting into the Preds. Now we're getting into the fun bits. So if you got this far, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. Ring that bell. All that cool influencer shit. Obviously, last week we did kind of fill out our brackets. Obviously, TLDR, Atlanta wins. We think Boston and Justice make it out. We think Toronto and Houston make it out. Yiska, do you want to quickly run through maybe your bottom 3 teams in each group?
The bottom 3?
Yeah.
Did we actually rank the bottom 3?
No, we didn't. But Eric is a gem and added the space. So.
Oh, for this year. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Wait, who is in Group
C? So Team Peps, Wisp, and Glads left on the table.
I mean, Glads would be next, right? And then, yeah, I actually, like, I'm gonna be honest. This is a toss-up for me because I don't know too much. I feel like Peps probably suffers from the same issue that other Contenders teams, that we like, the issue that we talked about earlier, where like they were picked for their parts pretty recently. So, maybe Wisp then Peps. I'm not sure. It's also playing on ping, of course.
Sure, that's fair. I'm gonna Eric, if you could lock me in for this order, I'm gonna go Peps, Glads, Wisp. From what I've seen from Glads, again, early scrim codes, I still don't know if I trust Dante as much as far as I can throw. And that is just off of that, transition and tank. It is difficult. There is a lot of fluidity like we've been talking about, right? I'm not super sold on that. I think everybody knows my hesitancy with Yaki. I think this team is going to need some time. On top of that, I don't know. Maybe this is something that somebody can correct me on. I don't know if Kev is going to be within the country. I don't know if he still is. That's still unclear to me because I know once the scrim codes got leaked, I believe he was still playing in Europe. So I think there's a lot of like factors that may play into a Glad's underperformance for people. I think Peps, if anything, maybe fit this meta a little bit more than people tend to give them credit for. I think they have a lot to prove. Yada yada yada. Fluffy intangible bullshit. I still think they can compete. I think this is a very tight group. It's probably going to come down to tiebreakers, if anything. And I'm concerned about the Glads. I think that's
Eric. Like, please move Glads for over Justice for me. Like, Joe is way too like, this is stupidity, dude. I'm getting annoyed.
Hey, if anything, that's what I'm good for. If I can poke the bear and get him to change something, then we'll go for it. So you're gonna tell me that Glads makes it out over Alfie after you?
They might just win the group now.
Okay, all right. At that point, I think I've done my job. All right, Door. Group C.
Wow. Okay, this got thrown at me real quick.
Yes,
but I think I've solidified things after my deep nap prior to this podcast. really got to sit and marinate on it for a bit. Okay, Uprising is the free space in number 1, right? And then my sage wisdom that I've gained from the from watching USA trials, which is only so valid. But yeah, I'm kind of with you on this Dante thing. I don't know if I can trust him as far as I can throw him. It's going to be Justice second for that reason. And then the toss up now is like Peps Glads.
Yeah.
Peps Glads.
close.
And then, like, I think J-Caro could actually be a really big difference maker in terms of just having a player that is extremely volatile on a hero that can be so impactful in the meta. Do I want to just like say screw it and pred something fun? I kind of do.
Glad's last.
Wait, bro. The longer I think, the more I'm just like sending myself down that path of
Dude, Rocket's crazy, man.
I've been casting Rocket since he was plat. I want you to know that. I cast him in a small league called Overwatch Tranquility in a little community tournament. He was plat once, bro. That kid is the bastion of improvement. But is he enough to go against Overwatch League Traces? I don't know. So let's go. I keep like making it up in my mind and then unmaking it up. I think I'll put Glads in the same place. I'll put them 4th. And then Peps. Let me have a double take at this roster. Hybrid.
While he's thinking about that, can everybody collectively sell me on Boston right now? Because
you're not wrong.
I feel like everybody's just been like, yeah, Boston first, obviously. So there you go. And then we just move past it. And I need a little bit of help. I need a little bit of help.
I'm not 100%.
I
can't.
There
was a team that feels the most solid in this group. It's them.
Yeah.
Like I think it is just a factor of like who else is in their group. Like comparatively, they seem like the safest bet because nothing else seems like a safe bet.
Nope. I don't know. And even then, it's like there's some volatility there. You know, old Boston can bring to the table. You gotta.
I think, like everybody is going into this. I think with that same mindset where it's like the talent is obviously there, and I think we can all absolutely agree. If you are not agreeing that the talent is there, you are out of your mind. But couldn't we also say that the talent was there for Shock? And Shock missed a little bit. Obviously, there are other things that happened with the Shock, obviously. You know, and there are certain things that maybe happened to the Shock that probably or might not happen to Boston. But I think everybody going in and being like, oh, the talent is just there it is like a maybe we shouldn't be putting as much, you know, stress on that as we are used to, especially given the nature of this tournament and how early on it is. But yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I was just giving Dora some time, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a realistic swap between 1 and 2 here. And all right, I've got it. I think I'm actually going to say this. So Boston, Washington, Peps, Wisp, Glads. I'm scooting them down.
Let's go.
I have to do it. I think in this meta, J-Caro is too powerful of a tool in a region where like Winston specialists aren't a thing. Like having somebody that just consistently kills 2 people with primal is kind of crazy. And I think the rest of the team can pull their own weight at least decently enough in this particular group. There's also an argument to be made, I think, to swap Washington and Boston, but I'll leave that for Heurix, the non-believer.
Eric, could you switch Gladiators and Boston for me, please?
Today's Bren swap featured by Yiska. Wow. How are you gonna do my man Smurf like that? Shame on you. All right, Heurix.
I think the polarization of Yiska's Glad's top to my Glad's bottom really says a lot.
This is probably the hardest group to call. So I don't think there is a wrong. Well, okay, there are wrong opinions, but like, it's you got to try to miss.
Okay, so I have 2 things to say before I dive into this that will inform the first thing I will be doing here with mine. So I think of the, what is it? 4. I think 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, of the 4 contenders teams that are left, I think there is a serious, and I mean serious chance, a high possibility that 3 of those 4 could find a spot. I'm not saying that they will find, like they will all collectively find a spot together at the same time. The likelihood of 2 in the same group for contenders making it through, I mean, very near 0. But 3 of those 4 teams, I think, have a genuinely good shot in some really tough groups. I think C is, the probably the toughest group to call. And I think it's because the top 4 groups I would expect are either super close together or we just don't know enough. And because of that, my first move is I'm placing Wisp at 5. So I just think, not to say anything, bad against Wisp. I think they're a phenomenal team. I love watching Wisp. I've always loved watching Wisp. They do have a lot of great talent, but they're in the same department as some of these other teams that, they are not exactly everything that they've always been. They have some newer pieces. Jakaru just came in. I love Jakaru, but they're another team that is just kind of figuring stuff out. And I've seen some scrims, and it just feels like they're a little bit behind in this moment. Obviously, coming into last year, they were one of the hottest teams out. Like they just were. But then obviously a lot of movement happened. They had some players going to other teams and stuff, and ever since it feels like Wisp is rebuilding to get back to where they were at the start of 2022 when they genuinely might have been one of the top contenders teams at that time. So yeah, I'll say that I think the highest likelihood that I could say right now is that Wisp is probably last in this group. Probably. My top 4, I think, could be literally anything. I genuinely I'm going to say I don't know right now. I genuinely don't know. But for the sake of this being a little bit more fun, I will say Peps at 2. I think Peps has a genuine shot at actually sneaking into this one. Yep. And I think a lot of the questions that we're going to see coming into this week is more with can teams actually get past Peps? I think Peps is going to be the gatekeeper.
Yes.
And we will probably see, one of, if not, a few of these teams like Glads, Boston, and Washington potentially struggle against them. I mean, it's a lot to ask a team to go in and play against a team that has a very defined strategy, a place in the meta. They have, figured things out very well. They play well. There's incredible talent there. Crandop is phenomenal, and it is absolutely a war crime that he's not in an Overwatch League team, in my opinion. And then they also have that flexibility. They have Molfig back as well, out of retirement. They are an incredible roster. Kellic, Zarian, fantastic. I mean, this could very well almost be an Overwatch League team, and that was similarly the case as well with Crandop's former team, EXO, last year. This is a phenomenal team. So I'll say that they go second. And then at this point, I'm just throwing darts at the board and I don't really care. So I'll just go ahead and guess we'll do Boston up top just because I think this is probably the safest one to say that the talent is just like so obnoxious that they have the highest ceiling, I guess. And then it's hard for me to say between Justice and Glads. I'm actually a Glads believer. Personally, I think that Glads are a team that I think a lot of people are saying are potentially going to be held back by the fact that Dante's hero pool is going to be a problem for them. I don't really think that's the case. Dante, I watched him all through those circus queues, or I don't even remember what did circus. It was called something else. Anyways, he was in those constantly, playing only tank always, and I've seen him playing the other tanks, and he at least stands up to a level on those picks where it's fine, I think, personally. And he's had even more time since then.
Sure.
And I think that they can do a lot of what some other teams have done, which is, just playing to their strengths. And, oh man, this team has strengths. I mean, even if you just look at a DPS line like Kevster and Kai, obviously they have Yaki as well. But I think that this team has a lot to offer. For this tournament, though, you know what? Fuck it. I'm buying in. Let's go. Let's go Glads third, and then I'll say Justice fourth. And I don't think there's really any good reasoning I can provide for a lot of these. The only thing that I am fully bought in on is Wisp at 5.
I feel
everything else.
That's like the safest.
Justice
so
4
crazy.
is the hard one to qualify for me. I feel like that's crazy.
It's just probably crazy.
It's everybody else just being like at least fairly competitive, where it's like you don't have to necessarily be huge on Glads to see like, okay, Peps is a team. They showed some teeth in EU. Boston, as much as I think I don't think they're like a great team. I think they're probably competitive in the mid pack in NA, just looking at like Overwatch League teams in general. I think this group is just so messy. That's where you're going to drop a map here.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is whoever makes it out is probably going to come down to a tiebreaker. So it's just like last map, game 3 scenarios across the board. And it's just whoever shows up better on the day, because then you have like every team has just like a weird caveat you could throw at them. That's just like, it is kind of darts at the board, and you're just kind of making like the most inferences.
I will say I'm throwing Justice at 4th just because it's the highest probability that I can win their love back afterwards. I live right next to the Justice, so I'm hoping I can rub shoulders at the cookout and win them back. That's the hope. So I'll just throw them at 4th because I think I can win their love back.
Nice. That's a good Hallmark movie. Yeah, I don't mind. I honestly, I think I speak for everybody when I say I don't mind Pep 2nd either.
No,
like on paper, it's like it's like EU. Well, I get London Spitfire is already EU, right? But it's like copy paste London Spitfire. I mean, Naga is the paralleler to Backbone rather.
Close enough.
Easily the best May in EU. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Every team here has a quirk, and you have just no clue how those are actually going to interact.
Yep. I don't think people realize what Hybrid is capable of, especially on a team that takes him and allows him to do hybrid things.
Think about map pool though. Think about map pool.
That's fair. Circuit's not in there. Circuit's not in there. Circuit's not in there, man.
There's no escort. Like hybrid just lost like 50% of his win rate. It's tough, but like I think if anybody's getting screwed by map pool right now, Peps might be feeling it. Yeah.
Are you guys not concerned?
That kind of makes me want to drop it a little bit. I'll leave it. I'll leave it for the sake of fun. But if there was Circuit in the mix here, I would put Peps at a clear 2nd.
Circuit, Junkertown, the hybrid maps.
Yeah. If they are able, and this was a genuine thing that they did, they had their strat. It was just let hybrid cook. That was the strat. There was nothing else going on. It was just everybody play, basically how it makes sense. Sure. And then we just allow time and space and opportunity for hybrid to win the lobby for us. And he literally did that multiple times.
Are you guys not concerned for the ping difference? I mean, it won't be like shock level 180. It will probably be more like 120, 110.
Yeah. I mean, everyone else is on min lat 90.
Yeah,
so.
It'll be close enough that I'm not as concerned about it as I was with shock. Shock is that's definitely a factor. Yeah. 90 to 180 is a massive difference. Genuinely, 180 to me is borderline unplayable personally. But they stomached it and they've worked through. That's just not going to be the case with Peps at all. Playing from I believe London or something.
Yeah, and to be fair, the only person on that team that it affects is probably hybrid. At least for the comps that they run, maybe Crand up.
Yeah.
I honestly, even in this group, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston doesn't make it out. I
don't hate that. No.
Yeah,
I could see a Peps Justice vibe. That seems very much possible, and I was starting to get convinced of it, but it's too late now. So
it's just so hard to kind of vote against them. But if anybody has pinged me in our Discord, damn well that I think Group C is just
impossible.
Big poo-poo. I don't like any of these Al teams, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not big on Justice. I like Alpha Yi, and that's about it.
Maybe I am the same way. Maybe I just like Alpha Yi.
Yeah. It's like there are bits and pieces of each roster that I'm like, oh, I like these I like these players, but I don't really care for these teams. And then I'm meshing them together with a team like Team Peps, who I think definitely can compete. God bless Wisp. It's just a scrap. And it's like, okay, well, you have a team of complete winners it's tough not to like juice them up. But I'll echo that point. I can see a world where anything happens.
I've wanted to change my top 4 like 70 times since I said them. Just so that's out there. Like I said, the only thing that I'm like fairly, and I don't mean like 100%, I mean like fairly confident in is Wisp at 5.
Yep.
That's the only thing I'm fairly confident in. And they could even sneak up 4, maybe even 3, I think, that there's a possibility that they could punch up. But I am fairly confident 5. And then everything else, I have no fucking clue. Like, no fucking clue at all.
Yep. That is gonna be, at least in my opinion, the group of death. I know that everybody has their own opinions, but that's just mine. So we're getting into Group D. Quickly, Yiska, hit me with your bottom 3 in Group D.
Oh, dude, this is hard. I also don't have any scrimbucks on NYXL. Dude, like, I honestly, like, I also have to say, I don't know too much about the other two teams. I didn't watch too much contenders there. I don't know. I think
qualifiers? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I basically have to gamble. I'd say like NYXL 4th. And then, yeah, I don't know. Redbird's 3rd, maybe.
Okay, Twisted Mind's coming in 5th, obviously. I'm gonna do a bit of an opposite take. I think much like a Saints, maybe much like a Peps from Group C. I think Twisted Minds is probably gonna be the gatekeeper to Group D. So I'm gonna lock them in at 3rd. I think Redbird's at 4th, and then I think NYXL is coming in at 5th. Didn't really care for what I saw. I think Kellen. I just think the team as a whole just needs a lot of time to like glue together, and the preseason is not that time to like really be judging them too harshly. They have some things that you could see in the future that could work. Just need to let it marinate for a little bit. I like what I see from Redbirds and Contenders. Obviously, a lot of players that you can remember. I think Twisted Minds as a whole is going to shock some, at least some NA only fans. A lot of talented members there. Obviously, advancing is EMEA's top seed, if memory serves. Scarily good team. Slept on, I think, quite heavily. And yeah, I think easily the gatekeepers. Heurix, we're gonna start with you. Because we started with Dor last time. Hit me with your top 2.
Oh, mercy from Lord Volamel.
Not yet.
So I'm just gonna do the most unsurprising thing to start off here. Just go ahead and throw Outlaws in the top spot. I know I just got done talking all that shit about how there's so much talent, but like, what does that actually mean? But I'm going to flip that and just be hypocritical and then attribute that the opposite. I'm going to take the opposite approach here and say, you have all this talent. How could you not get first?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put Outlaws at the top spot. Then going from there, I actually think after this, that's where some of the difficulty lies for me personally.
Okay.
Because I do, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something for the sake of this always helps them. So I'm going to say, this isn't who I'm referencing. I'm going to say that 2nd place. Ooh, I don't even know if I want to commit to this.
I'm right there. I wrote it down. I want to do some like crazy things in this group with the Preds, but
right,
man.
I wrote it down and I have it here, but I don't know where I'm at with it. Like how much do I really believe?
Okay.
It's so hard for me to not do it though at the same time. So just to kind of walk you guys through where I'm at instead of just wasting everybody's time and not committing to anything.
Sure.
So where I'm at is I would probably say regardless, I'm going to put New York at 5th. And I know I'm just never going in order, but that's just how this is going to have to happen. So between these middle three, I genuinely believe that there is so many different things that could happen. I think that Toronto is obviously an incredibly talented team. We know what they're capable of. We've seen it individually. Now they come together. And for most rosters, when you take a bunch of, like pretty solid proven talent and you put them together, there's always the question of, can they actually play together? Well, that question has already been answered. They very much can. We've seen it before. They are now going back to each other. Kind of an unprecedented thing to a degree, but it's a big deal. So you have to assume that Defiant should do well. They generally do adapt to metas very well as well. Twisted Minds, I think, coming into this tournament, it was like, okay, you have Trick Room and NA that could punch up. Saints should play extraordinarily well.
Sure.
Twisted Minds is another one of those teams that, like, if you're gonna bet on a Contenders team, Twisted Minds would be a great team to bet on. If you're looking to just kind of like hedge a bet and then just say, okay, if this pops, then I'm a big winner, but it has like the highest probability of actually happening. Twisted Minds, I think, falls into that realm for sure. I think that there is a lot of potential for Twisted Minds to actually wind up finishing in second here and actually beat out Redbird Esports and Toronto Defiant. And then lastly, Redbird Esports this is what I was referencing, that they are genuinely a team that could surprise a lot of people. But I'm going to leave them out of the top two because every time that I bet against them, they hate me for it and then they win. And I just would love to see a Contenders team actually like pop off. So I'm going to go ahead and throw Redbird Esports down in fourth just because I hope that they get like super hateful towards me and just pop off because of it. Because every time I vote against them, they always pop off. So I'm going to do that. Redbird at 4. And then I don't even know what to do with my 2-3. I don't know what to say about Twisted Minds versus Toronto Defiant. I think it could go either way. But I'm an NA boy at heart, so I'll go Toronto at second, and I'll go Twisted Minds at third. But I think those middle three could go so many different ways.
Agreed. Is there, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that this is a narrative for a team in NA. I just don't remember if it's Redbirds. Is Redbirds the one that usually goes like down?
Redbird Esports, by the way. It's Redbird Esports.
Not
first
Redbirds.
Map. Yeah,
they are the 0-1 team. I feel like in any other format,
that's a problem.
I would juice them and be like, yeah, you know what? I think they can do well, but the fact that they have to TSM their first map and just like toss it out there for whatever reason, that does kind of,
that's actually
ritual, actually.
I'm gonna buy into that. That's my reason. That's definitely that's my reason.
Okay, good. All right, Door.
All right,
Redbird,
the longer we talk, the better I feel about this. Okay. Houston number 1, and I actually think I can give a slightly better reason than Heurix. It's like, I think the other rosters like Boston Uprising, you look at and you're like, oh yeah, there's so much talent here. But Houston, it just feels like it locks together better, if that makes sense. Like the players fill against one another's hero pools better. It feels like they're better suited to the meta, and I think they are the makings of what a top team should be. What Group C lacks a clear kind of front runner in terms of having a well-built team with talent as opposed to just a team with talent. So I think that's why I put them number 1. I'll do the same thing as Heurix and I'll go to the bottom. And this makes me really sad to put this team at the bottom because I think I like almost everything about it except the tank line. And I have to put NYXL down. Which makes me so sad, but I'm just like, Kellen alone doesn't do it for me. Everything else on this roster is super sick. Fifth Shockwave Psycho, I'm high on. I think a Lep Aniun, Lep Creative like setup on support goes crazy.
That's if you see Lep, by the way. You're assuming you're going to see Lep. That may not be the case.
It could, yeah. Like after watching Trials, I'm kind of high on Lep. Like I thought Lep played pretty well.
I'm a big fan of Lep.
I just think in particular, from the scrims that I've seen lately, I just think Lep's performing particularly well. But yeah, I think that goes, the support line, no matter who they have in of those 4, just goes really hard. But Kellen solo tank, bro. Yeah, I'm sorry. It is like a breaking sheer point for this team. And I think a second tank would be well suited. So it's going to have to be number 5 there. And then I'll go to one that I think is less controversial. And I'm going to put Twisted Minds at 2.
Oh, yeah. All right.
I think this team is and has and will always be underrated. I don't know how many top 2s, top 3s it's going to take to convince you guys that this team is that good and they are only getting better and still improving every single time we see them. Not just in terms of hero compositions, shifting, kind of refining what was at once kind of a meme like, oh, okay, we have this far Echo player, to now distilled into a team that can play meta but has an extremely powerful weapon up their sleeve in LBBD. Like, I think this team is the perfect mix of meta and going to throw something at these teams that they have not been scrimming for. A reminder, this whole Pharah thing, it's an EU problem. Yes. Like, EU teams waste their time toiling away, having to play against Pharahs and scrims, trying to prepare for the likes of LBBD and Yazan, and then you shift over to a region where they just don't have to deal with that in ranked anymore, and they start to take over. And I think that they will gatekeep hard enough and they'll pick up enough wins early on in the group stage that they probably find themselves in this spot. And that I think it's a pretty solid reason for number 2. I think it's a good bout. I think Heurix was right to kind of ask himself about it. Is there anything else I want to say about here? I mean, the DPS line's crazy. Courts UB, LBBD. Yeah,
I do want to say it is Lambda. Everybody is probably going to get that wrong, but it is Lambda. Yeah.
And then KSA, solo tank in the meta. I mean, he fits, and he also has those unique tank picks that we were talking about with Atlanta that he can take out when he wants to, and he's going to look really good. And it can offer up another way for this team to kind of pull the big red lever on the wall and run a crazy composition should the shit hit the fan appropriately. And then Natel and Slayer are just always going to be consistent. I think Natel's got the flexibility, has really improved on things other than the Mercy in recent seasons, especially the more that we see those Quartz and UB compositions. And so I'm excited to see what they bring to the table and if they could actually kind of open up the meta and diversify it even more. 4th and 5th, I think I'm actually going to do it. Redbirds at 3rd. And this is just because I am...
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with the Toronto Defiant. Because I think this team obviously has a lot of the really good makings of a team that could do extremely well. Okay. But I'm not seeing like the standout crazy carry that I need from any particular player that we're getting from a lot of the other teams that are becoming top contenders right now. I think the DPS lineup is incredibly flexible. I think they offer up a lot of great consistency. Kaluj offers up great consistency. But considering that he's hyper flexing, it's hard to kind of 1v1 anybody on any particular tank. Sure. OG and Ultraviolet, I mean, nothing needs to be said, but I think almost every team has like a cracked support line right now, so I don't think that's like a massive advantage for them. And then going over to Redbirds, I think if any contenders team has the volatility to make it into out of the group, it's Twisted Minds, like Heurix was talking about, right? Like this team could kind of do it at any point in time. If there's a team you bet on, it's them. But if any team could make it through like with consistency and ability to play under pressure, it's probably Redbirds. And so that's why I put them up there. I think the Vision going live issue, especially with Hybrid being played every single series, is a very, very real threat. And the map pool, while it doesn't play well into things like, who were we talking about earlier?
Hybrid,
yeah. I think it plays the opposite role into somebody like Vision's hero pool, where that guy just gets a series with his name on it. And so that's why I placed them over Toronto Defiant. I think the map pool plays well into them. I think I see the pop-off potential. Toronto, I see a strong fundamental roster, but I'm not sure I see a gap anywhere on it against a lot of these teams that have some real weapons on them.
Yeah, it is a test. I think you raised some definite suspicions when it comes to Kaluge, who I think surprised me last year. Thought he did well given the situation of the shock. Obviously, bringing him in kind of late. His monkey looked okay. I thought it was a little like hesitant, and if anything, and that's like kind of a weird thing to say for somebody kind of coming into a roster late stage, playing heroes that he's not normally meant to play. Looked pretty safe. Looked pretty okay. Like more than serviceable. And it is when we talk about how fluid this patch seems to be, with Ramatra coming in, with Ryan being, playable, with Ball being playable, obviously Diva kind of, is in his wheelhouse, and his Sigma is probably, I won't say his best pick because I don't necessarily know I ain't know him like that. But he there is some ways you can kind of jujitsu that into, being a little bit of a leverage, a little bit of a weak point. There again, don't know how serious a lot of these L teams are taking the preseason, so there is room for some upsettery. But with our brackets with our groups locked in, now we can move into the brackets, which I believe, if if I'm actually looking at these brackets the right way, we actually have to do some little housekeeping on, because I don't think we don't think that our brackets make a whole lot of sense, because we just have the first side of the group. So I think we have to do a little bit of fixing. I don't think we have to change the winners. But Florida, London, I think makes sense for me. I think Yiska, it makes sense for Yiska as well. C1, D2. So for me, it would be Boston versus Toronto. Oh, that does make sense. Okay. No, okay. You kind of guessed. Oh, Boston, Toronto. I probably have Toronto advancing. Yiska, does that change Yiska's?
I have Shock over Toronto.
Okay, so you have Shock advancing to the finals against Atlanta. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just do yours. C1 for you. D1 is...
Rest works.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it does. Yeah, no, it does. Okay. So we'll go into...
final will be Atlanta against Houston.
I can correct Yiska's Group A. This is his prediction originally. I can make it the Florida, San Francisco. Right.
That's up to you. Don't matter to me.
Sorry, what's the...
So San Francisco, as a second seed, will open against the top seed in Group D, which is right now Houston predicted.
Yes.
So would it kind of, does that look correct to you, Yiska?
Oh, yes, still does.
Okay.
Yep.
Beautiful. Mine looks okay. So door, if you have the stream open, or if you have the spreadsheet open, first seed, or first match rather, you've got Mayhem London. How does that go?
Mayhem all day. Consistent. Don't think there's any question about that one. Okay.
Boston Twisted Minds. Now we're getting a little spicy.
This is hard. Okay, what does Boston have tools wise to take this team on?
They got weird amounts of tools.
Yeah, a lot of players on this roster.
Yeah.
Am I really gonna say this?
I don't hate it.
K Striker versus UB Courts, Smurf versus KSA. Give me Twisted Minds? Question mark? I'm maybe Heurix just talked a lot about Boston Uprising, but I do think again, I think Group C is a dogfight, and it's a dogfight for reasons because there's no clear team on top, and I can make much more clear arguments for I think a lot of teams in Group D, which is why I think I put that there. It's like I can make a more concise argument of why I see Twisted Minds being a successful roster than why I see the Boston Uprising being one. And I think on top of that, if Boston Uprising do have maybe the meshing issues or the like too many cooks in the kitchen issues that they might have, shuffling through your Swiss Army knife of players to try and figure out how the fuck you're going to deal with Lambda is like not something you have time to do right about now. So yeah, I think Twisted Minds there. I feel better about that than when I talk about it.
I like it. If I had that bracket, I'd say the same thing personally. But as we move on, we've got Houston Shock for you coming in.
All right. Let's go Shock.
Okay.
I like Houston. I think they have a lot of powerful tools. I think Shock has more powerful tools, and given the extra week of scrims that they'll be able to put themselves through and iron things out, I think they'll have ironed things out enough that their roster of just strong players is stronger than Houston's roster of just strong players. And under the tutelage of Krusty, I also trust that the meshing and the coordination should be better.
Fair play. Atlanta Justice rounds out the quarters, I believe.
Yeah, let's go Atlanta. I like Alpha E, but I like all the players on Atlanta more.
I think that's more than fair. We've got Florida Twisted Minds coming in as your top semi.
Okay, Florida. Checkmate. Sauna. I think Florida is going to just be able to play the meta better. I think Florida has the strongest grasp on the meta of pretty much any team that we've seen right now. Outside of like, they don't have a super strong Ramatra, but they don't need one. I think they understand how to play into it particularly well.
Okay.
And given the long series, I think they'll have plenty of time to take out Twisted Minds just by being confident enough on the meta that gatekeepiness of Twisted Minds is enough of a factor. And so it should be more Twisted Minds having to play against Florida Mayhem instead of the other way around. I think they take that for that. And then Shock Atlanta.
Potential grand final, maybe. Quite the heater.
Yeah.
Leave it to Overwatch to do something like this. Is the ping the difference maker?
Yeah, I'll say ping's a difference maker. Let's go, Rain. I'll cope and say ping. I think it's a close match no matter what, but I think Stalker and Lip are fully capable of marking proper.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think I've been that high on Heesang. I think he had one decent performance in the all of group stage, and I think it was like against a kind of punching down a little bit. So I think I think Lip Stalker is a more complete duo right now than proper Heesang. Not to say that Heesang couldn't improve a lot, couldn't kind of step into that role, but at least in terms of what I'm getting right now, Atlanta Reign are offering more individually and compositionally, and I think they're playing as a more complete team, which is crazy because Shock is literally all players from the same team coming to the Overwatch League, but somehow Atlanta Reign look like the more complete team in terms of what they're offering, and so yeah, I think I leave those two to it.
So do you make me eat a shoe, Door? Does Florida Mayhem topple the Atlanta Reign, or is Atlanta advancing as I think everybody and their uncle is expecting?
Reigns going on, man. I think it comes down to a DPS game. With that, I think both teams offer up a lot compositionally and specialize pretty heavily. But if I'm having a checkmate Stalker Tracer mark off, I think it's close. I think Stalker edges it out, and then there is just nobody on the Florida Mayhem to match Lip, hands down. So I think it's got to be Rain.
Much agreed. I think we were pretty glowing on the show last week about how Atlanta kind of is just in a weirdly perfect meta for them, and then that was prior to Hawk coming out on Ramatra and this team still looking phenomenal.
Yeah, and then they bring out the Diva comp. Like it feels like they just have endless talent and endless tricks up their sleeve. It's like if Twisted Minds like grew up into Overwatch League MVP candidates and then did the same thing, you know? Yeah, I think I actually feel more confident about my roster than I do my group stage preds.
I like a lot of the reasonings. I think Boston, much like we saw Shock in a weird way, that opening match in Group A with Shock Mayhem, you saw Mayhem kind of roll out on like the dive comp and play into Florida could roll out on the dive comp, Shock play the kind of bash and stuff that we saw in the qualifiers a little bit. Florida didn't really get how to play against it. Obviously, you know, when we sit back and we armchair analyst and we're like, oh, okay, like this is how you beat it. Everybody should know. Knowing and doing two very different things. So when you have somebody like Twisted Mind coming in and throwing a wrench into the game plan, you know, throwing in some weird questions that you're not necessarily practicing on answering, it's not easy to handle. So I'm here for it. Yiska, any thoughts there? Any bracketology
for what specifically?
For Door's bracket? Anything odd? You think Twisted Minds makes it? You think Boston maybe takes them? What's up?
Do you want me to comment on the Contenders Homer takes or?
Listen, whatever. I mean, I'm just whatever you want to do.
No, like I can't really throw any shade because I genuinely don't know too much about this team. So
that's fair. That's fair. All right, Heurix. Let's start at the top for you. We've got Mayhem London. Who you got?
Give me Mayhem, but I think I do want to add an asterisk that London are still better than I think people give them credit for. But
Okay.
I am going to take Mayhem. I do think that their style of playing the Winston does actually play. It seems like it plays well into a lot of those rush styles that we expect London to probably lean on in this matchup. Especially when you look at like the Kiriko Anna comp, you don't often see someone falling victim to a lot of the pain points that other Winston comps tend to fall into.
Sure.
The survivability that he has and the ability for someone like Checkmate to just kind of go off, I think are just way too high. So yeah, give me Mayhem there. Next one though,
Boston, Toronto.
I want to give some credit to Door a little bit here. I think based off of how the groups are set up and where these teams came out of qualifiers, because we don't know necessarily. I mean, it's been some weeks since qualifiers.
Sure.
I do think that the best hope to move past this first stage in the bracket for Contenders as a whole would actually be on Twisted Minds and Saints. Obviously, Saints isn't in the bracket, so there goes that.
Yeah, Saints with CJ would have been like I would have put
there
them
was
in
some
the same
potential.
spot.
Yeah. And then Twisted Minds is, I think, the other team that I could see like, okay, yeah, there might be a chance that they might actually catch a team like Boston off guard. However, I didn't say that they would take second, so we're not in that situation. But I will say that I like that Door did because I think one of us should. That's just how I stand with that. I'm probably going to do the boring thing here. I kind of assumed that
It's the boring thing.
I kind of assumed that it wouldn't be
here.
well, just based off of the other choices that everybody has made. Everybody went with Toronto Defiant. I think I kind of have to go with Toronto Defiant just because of like how much that I know about them. And what they're capable of. I have more questions about Boston, but those questions about Boston, I mean, when we see them play in their groups, they might be answered real quick, and I don't mean in a bad way. That team could genuinely be incredible. I mean, those are like top of the world players in every single role. They're going to be a hard team to beat throughout the year. I think the only thing that I have against Boston is whether or not they're going to fall victim to not ready for the meta. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't think that there's anything that alludes to them not being ready, but I'm just going to assume that Toronto Defiant, they're going to have that, synergy that is going to maybe take them over the top, especially in a meta where that actually does kind of define who wins and who loses in a lot of cases. I mean, look at Trick Room and what they're capable of pulling off because of that. I think that is going to be a factor here. So I'm going to take a very timid Toronto Defiant victory here, but I'm not 100% positive on it. The next one, what is this? Outlaws and Shock.
Yep.
This is a tough one. Go ahead and give me Rain on the bottom one because I don't even need to think about that. But yeah, this one's a little bit more difficult for me personally, because I could genuinely see this going either way. I am not a doomer for the Shock, even though I predded Trick Room to beat the Shock, and I also would have probably predded Trick Room to sneak out of groups, even though they didn't, just on the basis of where they were in the meta and ping diff and all the other things that were already discussed. I don't think that what we saw in game 1 for the Shock is going to be indicative of where they're going to end up come week 3. I mean, we have to remember that there is plenty of time for development between
Exactly,
what
that's what
we
I'm
saw
saying.
versus
True.
Trick Room and where we will see them come time to take on what I assume to be the Outlaws. Obviously, we don't know yet, but if this is the matchup here, this is a tough call to make, an extremely tough call. And I think at this point, I would maybe be flipping the coin almost, because if I look at Shock, I'm not as down on he's saying as like Door is, for example. I think he's saying will certainly kind of fall into where we set his expectation, which is obviously extremely high. And I think a lot of this is going to come down to just making sure that they're more prepared and more cognizant of how to play right now, like where things are at in Overwatch right now.
Right.
But obviously the potential, the ceiling is super high for them. And on the other side of things with Houston Outlaws, this could very, very, very easily be a team that is like the reign of their group, like unbeatable. Like, how is anybody going to take them on? They could easily be that team. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say Shock. I'm going to say people are going to doubt Shock. They're going to work their asses off over the course of 2 weeks. And even though there's going to be some ping issues,
I mean, maybe, right? Like maybe they will be in NA by that time. We don't know, right? Like,
yeah,
it's possible.
Yeah. I'm gonna take Shock there. Could go either way though. Could go either way.
That's smart, Heurix. I like what you did there.
What do we got here? So
Florida
back up to the Mayhem Defiant. And everybody, I came in and I didn't look at your guys' brackets, and I thought I was doing things that like people weren't vibing with, but now it's like everybody's vibing with. So yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, you guys know me. I'm a big Sun 1 believer. I think they're fantastic right now for the same reasons why I think they'll do. I expect them to do well versus Spitfire. I think that they'll be pretty good, just generally pretty good in this meta. I think they'll topple Defiant, and move on. I still love the Defiant though. I still love what they're capable of. Those are players that, I've been commentating and, I've met them all in person. I've talked with them, hung out with them, and like, you wouldn't believe the level of like camaraderie that exists between those players. And I remember one of the last times I came on here, we actually had a quick discussion where Yiska was doubting the friendship buff at a time, and I'm so bought into the friendship buff. It's unreal. It's probably too far actually, but I think it actually just does so much for a team, especially when you're talking about metas where that kind of stuff where you have to rely on each other to a large degree. I think it actually matters quite a lot.
You know, who's also friends? Eternal.
Yeah. See, we're gonna go ahead and in post, we're gonna edit that commentary out. But
I think as well, it's something you can't underestimate with the Toronto Defiant. If there ever was like a coaching staff that knew how to work with the friendship buff, Kasaurus, Wheats, No Hill.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. I think they actually have one of the craziest coach lineups in the Overwatch League. Like, I think given this, if I know I didn't pred them making it out of groups, but like, given a little bit of time, dude, this team's gonna be crazy.
Yeah. I think my biggest question with Toronto Defiant is, what can we expect them to play over the course of, their entire group? Like, are they going to come in and play one thing and adapt and pivot to something else? Is that going to cause problems for them? Are they going to come in and are they going to be incredibly confident in what they're going with and it is going to work out? Because that's the only question for me. If they find something that they're confident on, they will dominate. There is no question with regards to that. There is no question. I just don't know. I'm just not sure. I'm not doubting. I just don't know.
Right.
What they're going to come in with, and if it's going to be as good as what other teams are coming in with, as far as compositional choices, strategy, and stuff like that. Because in the past, we have seen this group of players, this collection of players, falter slightly because they were just a little bit behind on meta. I'm looking specifically at, what was it, March, April 2021 with Rush and Rush Vival, where they did not win that Contenders tournament because they were just a little bit behind on the meta. And they got caught up very fast, but sometimes you just don't have enough time. And that is very much the case with this tournament. So I will say Mayhem, but another match where it could go either way. I don't know. Give me Rain. Why are we even talking about it?
Yeah. Hard to argue. In the final, you got Mayhem, someone coming in. Is he going to take it?
Do it. Do it when none of us had the balls to do.
If it makes you feel any better, I do have a running bet. I don't know how I've racked up so many bets. That if Atlanta don't make it and win the Pro-Am, I have to eat a shoe. Or a shoe-shaped baked good.
I do hope that happens. So in a way, there's a win for me here either way.
There's
right?
you have a win-win possibility here. Like
there's
that's
a win. Yeah, there's a win-win scenario here for me, which is to go with what everybody else has gone with and what my gut and everything, my brain, everything tells me Rain here. And for that reason, I will be taking the Rain. Thank you very
much.
Well, there we have it. Yiska?
Can I say, part of me still believes that I don't know when it will happen this season, and it very likely won't during Pro-Am, and it's 0 leaks. But some part of me still feels at some point in the season, like Toronto is going to play, Boss Music will be playing, and Reiner will be on that team. I still think this is a very real chance. I hope they stage it that way. I hope it doesn't leak, and I hope it just happens. Please finagle with Blizzard that, I don't know, Reiner can play on Kulush's account if you scrim and whatnot. Like, just sneak that boy in. And then, if that was the case, I would be much more confident in that team.
Sure.
I would say Toronto would move to Grand Final if Reiner was on this roster. Just because of the flexibility that they would then gain at that role. And I think Reiner was also like someone, I remember coming into last year, a lot of people were asking me, I was getting actually like kind of flooded with DMs by a lot of people in the league that were asking me about, what to expect with Reiner and stuff. And even in the community as well. And I mean, I said it then and I'll say it again now. If there is a point where we do see Reiner this year, and I genuinely don't know. I have no idea. He is still someone, I think he proved it last year, but before he even did that, I was fully behind as someone that could be like a potential solo carry tank player. Like he could probably play almost anything as long as you give him opportunity to develop on that hero. But certainly the things that we know he's strong at, he is incredibly strong at and amongst the top in that role. And I still firmly believe that. I know people still won't commit to that because it's an NA player, and for some reason that means that they're just not allowed to be top like 3, 4, whatever in their role. But I still believe that. So yeah, if he came back, oh man, I would be putting Toronto higher just because of flexibility. But the rest of the roster is still great, and I think they're well deserving of a top 4 finish, if not maybe even higher.
Yeah, agreed there. I think that was kind of my assumption coming into the off season, was that Toronto was going to pick up Reiner, get the AT core, and I was like, oh yeah, that could give ATL a run for their money. Like, I don't know, like I'm a little NA pilled. Like that's a good team. Hydron in some of these scrims. I don't know if he's if he's cooking in World Cup trials, but
I actually ran into Hydron in a game, like in yeah, he was I'm not going to give too many details away. But I will say that there is no one, and I have played with a lot of these players actually, like in ranked queue. There is no one I have ever played with that I can think of that has ruined and I mean ruined, a GM lobby like Hydron playing Widowmaker on Circuit Royale. There is nobody that I can think of. Nobody.
Dude, you gotta watch the USA. You gotta watch the USA trials, dude.
Oh, I saw.
I saw Aspire.
I did see Aspire
in Jokertown.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I did indeed see Aspire absolutely clap the boy Hydron, and that is certainly something that I think a lot of people actually in the scene maybe not surprised about. Aspire is an incredible Widowmaker. But yeah, I do think from personal experience at least, Hydron ruined a ranked lobby. He was on my team and the game was ruined because I didn't have to play. So I just sat there and AFK'd with the rest of my team while this Widowmaker just absolutely obliterated the entire lobby and nobody was able to get out of spawn.
Jeez.
So yeah.
Kid's the truth. I heard it. I think you gassed him up. My DMs. I've seen the truth. I think I've only gotten to like him a little bit more with some of these scrims, and I expect them to do quite well. So yeah, if Toronto ends up with a Reiner pickup, just top deck Reiner, like that's maybe pushing into championship territory, or at least fighting for it.
And it's not a slight to Kalush, right? Like I feel
not
like,
at all. That's you need Kalush to get there too. Like he's gonna be a part of that
mandatory
team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, all these pieces matter. Like
yes.
I think a lot of people would look at some of these and maybe slight a player like, oh, you don't get there because you're missing like a tank, but that's not a slight against Kalush. You still need Kalush. Like, oh, maybe, Sam or Speedily don't fit into. No, you need those players. Yeah. Sam and Speedily are mandatory requirements for this team to be rated as highly as we say they could be. Majed, another prime example. Even though everybody is talking up OG Ultraviolet, Majed is a major factor in this roster and why we're putting them, like why everybody puts them highly. Majed is a massive piece for this as well. Even though the expectation is OG UV, Majed still matters big time.
I agree.
You need those double flexes.
I'm super. That's actually one of the things I'm most hyped about. Like I feel like with the narrative when the AT core first came into the league was like there are definitely, I think, like for instance, people probably had Hydron towards the lower end of the distribution of those players' expectations. I feel like a lot of people were very high on Ultraviolet. And that sort of didn't happen. And I think Ultraviolet even agreed. I think, if I recall correctly, like I had those guys in the Toronto interview rate their rookie season. I think Ultraviolet gave himself like a 3 or a 5 out of 10, right? I still feel like he has a lot to prove. And
Ultraviolet, has a much higher ceiling than what Overwatch League fans have seen. For sure.
I mean, if we saw like a little bit of it at the start of the season.
Yeah, if we want to talk support lines, I'm actually starting to look at this team like, dude, this team looks like they could do whatever they want during the season and then just go undefeated on Circuit Royale.
Yep.
Like Sir Majid, Ultraviolet, double flex, Kaluj on Sig, and then just Hydron and whoever the fuck else they want to put in with it. Like that
it doesn't even matter at that point.
Crazy.
If it's like Echo, like man, just let Speedily go crazy. But
I like Hydron, Ultraviolet, Majid, dude. Circuit Royale is going to be owned by this team.
I so wholeheartedly agree with you unless Houston Outlaws didn't exist.
I mean Atlanta, no?
Atlanta too. Yeah, no,
fucking
another
Vigilante,
crazy
fucking
yeah.
Fielder, dude. Look. Yeah.
Lip
Overwatch
Lip
League
on
pack
Widow,
now.
Yeah, Escort is going to be a bloodbath.
I don't see it. I don't know. I don't see Atlanta in the same complete way. No, I'm not buying it. I still think Toronto solos Circuit against everybody. That's crazy.
It's going to be a correct, like this season is heat. It's crazy. I think there's a lot of this is a great season. I think we haven't even necessarily gotten to APAC yet, and I'm chomping at the bit to get there.
We gotta wait for a few things to come in.
Yeah, there's definitely some legwork to be done there, wholeheartedly. And as we wrap up, I want to thank you guys for coming on, doing the brackets, talking shop, sharing your thoughts about Pro-Am, and hats off to you guys for putting on one hell of a performance.
Thank you, man.
With the opening the show.
For sure.
Before we close things out, Yiska, what's coming down the pipeline for you?
I'm just trying to get some more team interviews. This week was like a lot of unfortunate situations where they just had to be canceled. So looking forward to bringing more next week. I think my editor Elliot is not available anyway, so that would have probably clogged the pipeline anyway. So fortunate coincidences, but like working on that and a bunch of stuff behind the scenes.
Nice. And for the two of you, Heurix, is there anything you guys got cooking? Anything fun coming up? You guys do anything?
We'll have announcements coming soon. We'll see how that stuff pans out. But nothing too crazy. Expect the expected, I guess, in that regard, right?
Fair play. Tor, I know you got something cooking.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to manage to grab co-streaming rights for the rest of Pro-Am. So here is the YouTube link. And also, that's gonna be going down at @Door_Cast on YouTube. I'll be co-streaming pretty much the entirety of the rest of Pro-Am. On top of that, tomorrow, which I don't know when this video is coming out, but tomorrow the 30th, before Pro-Am co-streaming, I'm going to have a video breaking down a lot of things that went down in the USA closed trials. I'll probably run it back again following some Pro-Am stuff and whatnot. But I've been getting a lot of stuff down the pipeline. And so if you guys want to check that out, check the YouTube channel out. It'll be co-streaming and having a few more things regularly done for it.
Yeah. Oh, after you immediately when you're done watching this, go watch Door's video about closed trials, because apparently that's just juicy as all get out. Apparently Hydron's popping off. I'm getting DMs that Super might just steal the top spot, might be coming back, unretiring himself for a gold medal. I don't know. Shit's crazy. Go show some love there. And I think hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll have a little bit more info on a possible Trick Room interview. So that possibly might be coming down the pipeline. We've got power rankings. We've got shit coming down. It's getting late. I got to get these guys out of here. So that's going to be 289. We'll be back next week, hopefully, for more Pro-Am stuff. So stay tuned, support Overwatch, and we'll see you. Goodbye.